Welcome everyone to the Fantasy and Betting Podcast presented by the 33rd Team. I am your host as always, Josh Larky. I'm joined as always by Ryan Reynolds. We're here to get you ready for week one. We're going to go team by team talking matchup disparities, fantasy thoughts, betting insights, the overall team outlooks that we're going to be looking at for this entire 2023 season. And we're going to get it all done in about an hour. Reminder before we get going, my week one fantasy rankings are already on the33rdteam.com. Ryan's updated record predictions will be up on the site later today for every single team. And make sure to follow him on Twitter at Ryan Reynolds NFL. Let's dive right into the AFC East. Ryan, you have the New York Jets atop this division, finishing with 12 wins, 5 losses. For fantasy football out there, I think everyone's kind of wondering about Breece Hall versus Dalvin Cook, what that split looks like. That is what I'm going to be most focused on at this point. I think we can all assume that Aaron Rodgers, like always, will be playing fairly slowly, and he'll be playing fairly efficiently. And I think that's what the passing offense is going to look like. The run game split, I think it's going to be some combo of Breece Hall as Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook as A.J. Dillon, with a little more upside for Hall, but week one will kind of tell us all we need to know about that split. Ryan, what are you looking for with the Jets this season?
I think the Jets might have the widest range of outcomes this year because if Rodgers returns to his MVP caliber form of 2020 and 2021, the Jets can literally beat anyone. They can go in Arrowhead and win a game 27-17. And there's, 3-4 teams in the whole league that even have a shot at that. So I think their ceiling's enormous, and I'm leaning into that a little bit more than most. And the downside, Rodgers is going to be 40 years old at the end of the year. If he gets hurt or if he significantly declines, the Jets are where they were last year, essentially.
Let's move on now to the Buffalo Bills. I know everyone, we all love the Bills, except Ryan does not, apparently. He has them with 11 wins, 6 losses, making the playoffs, but finishing a game out of first place. The two big things I'm looking for fantasy will be the James Cook role. And is he going to be used like an Austin Eckler, or is he going to be used like a Nyheim Hines? And I think if we talk range of outcomes, I could really see it being anywhere where it wouldn't surprise me if he gets 5 to 7 carries a game. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets 10 to 12. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets 2 to 3 targets a game. We could also see him routinely getting 4 to 6 targets and being one of the leaders among running backs and receptions. And then the other player would be rookie tight end Dalton Kincaid. We know rookie tight ends do not score fantasy points. They're not allowed to, except I think we might have found the exception where Dalton Kincaid appears poised to have a true slot role with Dawson Knox as the inline tight end who's often blocking, and Kincaid is essentially just a big wide receiver in the slot for this offense. Ryan, what else do you want to add here about the Buffalo Bills?
I mean, Josh Allen's the man. We all know that. My issue here is there's so many talented teams with premium quarterbacks in the AFC. All of a sudden, they've closed the talent gap on Buffalo. I don't think they have an edge there anymore. And in some cases, I actually think they're playing at a deficit in that area. So I like Josh Allen. I think the Buffalo Bills window's closing, though.
Let's move on now to the Miami Dolphins, another talented team in the AFC East. You have them finishing 10-7. What I'm going to be looking for fantasy is really how this running back split works. I think we all know the offense is funneling through to Tagovailoa, passing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But the running back room, it's probably Raheem Mostert as the early down grinder, getting his 15 to 20 carries a week. And it's probably Devon Achane getting a few carries with a lot of pass game work mixed in. But I think we could see some fluctuations where we could see Mostert early in the season taking on a larger role than that. We could even see Devon Achane fairly quickly making sure that his presence is known and that he's taking close to 10 carries a week along with real pass game involvement. So Raheem Mostert feels like the more stable early guy for the season. And then Devon Achane's the type of player where I get it. He's a rookie. 3rd round draft capital is pretty good. He is undersized, but so is Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert's under 200 pounds as well. So I think with Devon Achane, he looks like the guy that either just never quite does it, or next thing you know, you go, wow, we've got a total league winner on our hands. And we might as well plug the waiver wire week 1 article that just came out from Nick Bodiford, because he breaks down the Miami running back that you should scoop off waivers. And why that in many ways is Devon Achane. Ryan, what are you looking for with this Dolphins offense, and anything that you want to add about the defense?
I love what they're doing. I loved what they were doing last year. Mike McDaniel stacking speed with Hill and Waddle. That's a unique combination in the history of the league, in my opinion. Love what they're doing. Thing is, I'm more confident in Rodgers than I am with Tua. That's why I have Miami. I think Miami has the same ceiling as the Jets. I think they can beat anyone in the best case scenario, but I'm leaning more into the middle there. We're 10-7. Maybe they missed the playoffs and a loaded AFC is the outcome here. And, if Jalen Ramsey was healthy, I'd have them at 11-6 still. But since he's out, I think that's a little bit of a nick. That said, Vic Fangio's been brought in to call the defense. That's an upgrade for them. Miami is one of the teams that could be top 10 offense, top 10 defense this season.
Yeah, very, very high upside range of outcomes there. Let's turn to the New England Patriots. You have them finishing 7-10. I assume a lot of that is purely because of Bill Belichick. This does not look like a great roster. For fantasy, I think the question is obvious. Will anyone be fantasy relevant aside from running back Ramondre Stevenson? My money is on no, but I think after week one, we'll kind of be able to either cement that or start to modify our priors. What do you want to add about this clear bottom feeder in the AFC East?
No, in general, I think this is a 4-win team that Bill Belichick gets 7 or 8 wins out of because he's, the best to ever do it. The big problem is their schedule is just absolutely brutal. So I can't see them getting much past 7 or 8 wins.
Glad we're in agreement there. All right, let's move on now to another extremely exciting division, the AFC North. You have all these teams projected for winning records. Let's start at the top with the Cincinnati Bengals. You have them at 11-6. What I'm looking for fantasy is the running back usage each week. What we saw last year was very interesting. We saw Joe Mixon's rushing workload get scaled back at times, and we saw a real spike with his receiving workload. He took a big pay cut to stay with the Bengals this year. And then behind him, I think we both would lean that it's Chris Evans and that it's his time to shine, and in the potential Samaje Perine role. We will probably know after week one if that's truly his. I don't believe it's Travion Williams, who I think is in year 4 now, and he's never touched the football, and he missed the preseason with injuries. And then we have 5th round rookie Chase Brown. I believe he was at Illinois, which does not sound like NFL competition to me. I see you thinking, you're like, yeah, back when we used to do rookie prospecting, I think he was at Illinois. Yeah. All-purpose skill set, fairly good size, very athletic, but extremely raw, bad pass blocker, probably not the guy. So all signs point to Chris Evans. And then, as many of you have known at this point, Jamar Chase is our wide receiver 1 for fantasy football for 2023. We're expecting a big game out of him in week 1. And I think just in general, if he and the Bengals offense can put it all together, this team looks like one of the clear Super Bowl favorites.
Yeah, I had him at 12-5 in May when the schedule released. Given Joe Burrow's calf injury, have to downtick him a little bit there. Stuck him at 11-6. I think they're going to win the division. I actually think they're going to go to the Super Bowl and win it. I think this is Burrow's time, but we have to at least be a little cautious about his injury until we see him play real games.
Let's move on now to the Baltimore Ravens. You have them at 11-6. The big question that I want to know for fantasy is what's the game plan each week? Will there be enough volume for 1 to 2 of that wide receiver trio of rookie round 1 pick Zay Flowers, former round 1 selection Rashad Bateman, and then veteran Odell Beckham Jr.? Obviously, Mark Andrews is a weekly start. We love him in fantasy aids. You would never not start Mark Andrews any week, but how do we see this offense shaking out? We have new offensive coordinator Todd Monken. He's always been part of pass-heavy offenses, and he's now paired with one of the 2 or 3 most run-heavy quarterbacks in NFL history. So I think that's kind of forces colliding into each other. I believe the pass game wins here, but again, it's Lamar Jackson. I don't think it would surprise either of us if, once again, they're running the ball more than they pass the ball on a weekly basis. What else are you looking for with this Ravens team?
What's interesting for me is I think, like you said, I think the passing game's going to win out long term. But in the beginning, bunch of new receivers, new offense. I could see them struggling early. Lamar Jackson's never won a playoff game, so I think the scenario here is I think their regular season could be a little bit turbulent at times. But in the playoffs, I think they might actually knock someone off this year.
Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've been bumping them up. I don't know what changed. You're gonna have to let me know what changed. Now I have them at 10-7. They have usurped the Browns. They are now third place in this division. For fantasy, I think it's pretty obvious. We need to see if Kenny Pickett takes a step forward. He threw 7 touchdowns and 9 interceptions last year. I think it's going to be a lot better, but it might not be. I think overall, though, this is another like pretty wide range of outcomes offense. I think George Pickens, whether or not he can take a step forward in year 2, A, and then B, he was coming off the ACL tear last year. So maybe he takes another step forward. And I think this has the potential to be one of the better NFL passing offenses because Kenny Pickett, if he does take a step forward, this is a guy with round 1 draft capital. The NFL clearly thought, at least some teams were like, this is a potential franchise cornerstone. And then, I mean, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens is a very good NFL trio. And then the running back room. Is this the death of Najee Harris? You and I don't think so. We do believe he's the lead back. Some out there still think Jaylen Warren is legitimately pushing him for true playing time, maybe taking over that role. I think we'd both lean towards a 65-35 type split with Najee Harris in the front. But again, we'll adjust if we need to after their week 1 game against San Francisco. What else do you want to add here about this Steelers offense, and where did that extra win come from?
Yeah, first I'm going to say about the running back group, I think it's a good problem to have, they're not looking to win fantasy tournaments or anything like that. They're just looking to win football games. Having 2 guys who can play is a pretty good problem to have. Now with the Steelers, here's the thing. Mike Tomlin's had a winning record 15 years in a row. 9-8's their baseline at this point. Like he's earned that. The Pittsburgh Steelers have earned that. Especially after last year where they were, they had to basically win out to get there. So they have a premium defense, at least a top 10 unit, bordering on a top 5 unit. And then, like you said, Kenny Pickett's probably going to be better this year. Pickens is probably going to be better this year. Offensive line's better. Deontay Johnson's a very stable player, and they have a good running back room. So, given their schedule, I don't remember exactly which game I flipped, but I think 10-7's. I want to be a little bullish on Pittsburgh.
Let's move to the Cleveland Browns. You have them at 9-8, a very worthy, we'll say a very worthy last place team. Another pretty obvious one for fantasy, and I think for real life. Which Deshaun Watson do we see? Do we see the guy that looked like he was fast-tracked towards the Hall of Fame in Canton through his first 4 seasons? Or are we seeing the guy that, honestly, if he didn't have the contract, probably should have been benched last year in that 6-game sample where he looked god-awful? And then the other player that I think, which version do we see for fantasy, would be Elijah Moore. As a rookie with the Jets, we saw a 6-game stretch where he was a top 3 fantasy receiver, where he was an absolute target monster, making guys miss after the catch. And you went, wow, we can funnel a pass offense through him. And then last year, he was losing out on playing time to guys like Corey Davis. So I think those are kind of the 2 big ones that I'm looking at there. Some people are very focused on the Nick Chubb role. I think he adds maybe a rush attempt, maybe a target per game. I don't think it's going to look that different, but I think there's probably a slight uptick in pass game usage. What else are you looking for from the Browns here?
2 things. I think the Browns are going to be better in the second half than in the first half because, like you said, what we saw at Deshaun Watson last year was genuinely bad. So we don't know what we're going to get out of them, but their schedule is easier in the second half. I think they're going to be better then. That said, if the Cleveland Browns were in the NFC, if they were in the NFC North, I'd probably have them winning the division. I'd have them winning the NFC South. The problem in the AFC this year is there's going to be 3 or 4 really good teams that don't get in the playoffs because that's the way it has to be. So I think Cleveland's going to end up being one of those.
Guys, make sure you're following Ryan at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Nobody talks about football like he does. He's been watching every snap of every NFL game for nearly a decade. Now, before we move on to the AFC South, reminder, Week 1 fantasy rankings are on the site. They're up. I will be adding player write-ups to give more context later today and tomorrow. That way, when you look and you go, wow, Josh really likes Michael Thomas, I will explain why I like Michael Thomas for Week 1. That's a controversial player. If I have him ranked aggressively, I should probably explain that. I really like Sky Moore for Week 1. I should probably explain why I don't have him as like the wide receiver 50, like a lot of the consensus sites do. So any players I'm extremely high, extremely low, or just even slightly higher or lower on, they will all get a write-up over the next 36 hours. AFC South, we'll speed through this one. Don't worry, folks. We know this is not quite the AFC North or AFC East. You do, though, have one juggernaut in the division, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 12-5. For fantasy, I'm looking at Trevor Lawrence. Is he going to take another leap forward? We saw such a Herculean improvement from year one with Urban Meyer, the disaster, to year two of his NFL career, his first with longtime former Eagles head coach Doug Peterson. And we went, wow, the golden boy, the prospect that we all loved, looks like he's actually starting to take shape in the NFL. I think we're both expecting another step forward in his third season and second season under this new coaching regime. And that's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats situation for fantasy. The other rising tide will be Calvin Ridley. If Calvin Ridley's really back, then he's the wide receiver 1. Christian Kirk gets to be the wide receiver 2. Zay Jones gets to be the wide receiver 3. Evan Engram looks like a matchup nightmare when defenses have to focus on those 3 receivers. Travis Etienne's also in the backfield. So I think if Calvin Ridley's really back, which I think we believe he is, then that just elevates this entire offense from, oh yeah, it's probably a top 10 unit, to there's a chance this is the second or third best scoring offense in the NFL. What else do you want to add here about the clear division favorite in the AFC South?
With you all the way on the offense. I mean, in a best case scenario, Trevor Lawrence is this year's MVP. That's in the range of outcomes here. That's a possibility. But the thing that Jacksonville has over all of the other powerhouses in the AFC is, we'll take the Bengals, for instance. They get 2 games against the Ravens, 2 against the Browns, 2 against the Steelers, 0 easy outs. The Jaguars get 2 against the Titans, 2 against the Texans, and 2 against the Colts. That's a massive advantage for them, especially in the games against the Texans and the Colts, where they should go 4-0 against those teams. Massive advantage for them. I think that propels them to like a 12-win season. Daniel Raz was on this 2 months ago. The Jaguars to be the number 1 seed in the AFC is a pretty decent mid-range long shot bet.
Second place, you have the Tennessee Titans at 7-10. You're going to have your offensive line rankings up on the site soon. The Titans, I believe, if I remember correctly, are dead last. This is, I mean, a lot of people are like, offensive line play doesn't matter. I would push back on that. But I think if anyone still thinks that in the year 2023, you should watch the Tennessee Titans this year, because games are going to be wrecked at times by how bad this offensive line looks. And it's at direct contrast with the 4 like quite solid real life and potential fantasy assets on this team, where we have quarterback Ryan Tannehill. He's probably a slightly above average passer. Derrick Henry's still one of the better running backs in football. He's added a lot of receiving chops to his game the past 2 seasons. DeAndre Hopkins is going to make the Hall of Fame one day. He's still clearly towards the top of his game based on how Arizona tried to funnel the pass offense through him. And then Treylon Burks was taken round 1 last year. He's dealt with some injuries, but we also saw flashes at times of the player that was an absolute dominator in college football, a total mismatch, a big weapon with speed. What else do we need to add to this Titans team, where the offensive line looks like the biggest problem? I guess 2 questions. Tell me more about the O-line, and then this pass game, or the pass game secondary on defense. Will they be the league's worst unit like last year?
Yeah, I think that's the problem for this team in general, is the offensive line. The left side has a chance to get better, but we have them in the bottom 3 right now. That's where they were last year. That's a problem. And like you said, I don't know if the secondary is the worst secondary in the league, especially because they have a good pass rush, but they're like a bottom 5, bottom 10 group too. They get shredded all the time. And in the AFC with so many quality teams, the Titans are very well coached. They steal games from people all the time, but there's just so much competition in the AFC, where if the Titans were in the NFC, I'd probably have them as the 7th seed. In the AFC, they're probably the 11th best team. So 7-10. Think they're going to be a tough out in a lot of scenarios, but they just can't match up talent-wise with a lot of teams.
We've got the Houston Texans 5-12. Dameon Pierce, is he a bell cow? The preseason indicates yes. The talent from what we saw last year in many ways indicates yes. And then for fantasy, I have no interest in ever starting CJ Stroud at all this entire season. But if he's just quite good enough, then we could have Nico Collins potentially emerge. Nico Collins' peripherals were actually quite strong for real life, for fantasy football last year. The target share was almost 20%. His targets per route run was the same as Devonta Smith. And it was at a higher average depth of target than Devonta Smith. I'm not saying he's Devonta Smith. Smith was competing with A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert for targets. But I think it shows that there's at least something in Collins' profile where he's big and he's fast, and maybe he gets enough targets each week to be relevant. What else do you want to add here about the Houston Texans?
I mean, they're a young rebuilding team. I was bullish on their offensive line. I still think it'll be fine, but left guard Kenyon Green's out for the year. That reduces the ceiling of that group a little bit, reduces my enthusiasm to a degree. So, rebuilding team, 5-12. I think they're going to be feisty, but not a whole lot of team success.
Let's turn to the last place in the division. We have the Indianapolis Colts at 4-13. For fantasy, I want to know what the run-pass split is like with Anthony Richardson under center. I think it'll be run heavy enough that we won't have any consistent fantasy relevant options in this pass offense. And then who's the running back? While Jonathan Taylor's out, I think the starter at this point looks like it's probably Deion Jackson. I think if Zach Moss didn't break his arm, it would have been him. And then we'll just have to monitor the pass catching rookie, Evan Hull, who's big, fast, was hyper productive in college. But again, he's a rookie. I think this is the type of team that's going to play rookies more to figure out what they have. But again, I think what we see with NFL teams year after year, they often just defer to the veteran. So that this running back room is one to look at. I'll be monitoring it closely, especially right now for my week 1 fantasy rankings and any movement that has to happen. What else do you want to add here about the Colts?
The Jonathan Taylor situation is just so bizarre where everyone in the locker room's got to be looking at each other sideways. Like, what exactly is going on here? And I don't think that's a good thing for a rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson and a rookie head coach in Sean Steichen, who actually have a pretty interesting ceiling long-term. I think that just creates like an unnecessary issue internally for them. So again, similar to the Texans, I think the Colts are going to struggle early. I think Richardson's going to break some slates in fantasy with his legs, and that they're going to play their best football towards the end of the year.
Guys, reminder, Ryan's betting previews and projected scores for every game are going to be on the3013.com very shortly. They'll be coming out later today, all the way through Thursday. So make sure that you're tuned in for that. Those are all free on the site. Let's turn to the final AFC division, the AFC West. You have the Kansas City Chiefs atop the division. No surprise there. They're 12-5 in your predictions. We'll talk about them more a little bit when we preview that Thursday night football game with them and the Lions. But I think the question I have right now is, how's Travis Kelce's hyperextended knee? Is he going to play week 1? Is this a major issue in any form? And then the other thing that I'll be looking at is Sky Moore. I think he becomes the slot man we all hoped Juju Smith-Schuster would be last year. But I think ultimately week 1 will help us realize if that's probably the case or not. What else do you want to add to the Chiefs and their outlook?
Yeah, I mean, their two best non-Patrick Mahomes players are hurt or out right now. Chris Jones is out too. So betting the Chiefs over the last few years has actually been close to free money. I'd stay away from it now with those two situations. But, at the end of the day, as long as Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are together, they're going to be a tough out. So still a 12-11 win team.
You have the Los Angeles Chargers finishing second, a very worthy division opponent to the Chiefs at 11-6. I'm looking to see what the pass attack under new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore looks like. He came over from Dallas. Dallas was the number 1 scoring offense in 2021, and then the number 4 scoring offense in 2022. Ultimately, will Justin Herbert's talents finally be maximized in the NFL? Because so far through 3 seasons, all we've been left with is a lot of question marks about why have the Chargers not quite gotten over that hump. And I think for fantasy football, we all know what this could mean. If it's the offense we're hoping for, it's going to be bananas. We're going to have potential wide receiver 1 type finishes from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Quentin Johnston, their round 1 rookie, could surge towards the end of the season. Austin Eckler has averaged 19 touchdowns a season the past 2 years. He has 12 more total touchdowns than any other running back during that span. Will that continue? So I think everything kind of rests on paper. It's one of the 3, 4, 5 best offenses in the NFL. The ceiling is the best offense in the NFL. We saw the floor last year when everyone gets hurt and the game plans are a little questionable at times. What else do we need to look at for this Chargers offense, and any notes on their defense?
Yeah, you're a Chargers fan, so you've been through this a lot. It's like they have the raw materials to go the distance. I mean, I actually think they might have the most talented supporting cast on offense, and Herbert's a top 5 quarterback. So, like you said, the sky's the limit. Best offense in the league is the limit. And, on defense, Joey Bosa and Derwin James are a pretty good pair of headliners. So they have a great roster. It's just a question of, do they stay healthy? Do they put it all together?
Let's turn to the Denver Broncos. You have them improving. You do not have them hitting heights that I think some are hoping for with new head coach Sean Payton. You have them an 8-9. For fantasy, I'm looking at the running back room. Javonte Williams, I think the word you used earlier this offseason was, will he beat science? He tore like it was like his ACL, his PCL, his LCL, maybe some other CLs. Basically shredded his entire knee last year. And it's the same injury that kept J.K. Dobbins out for most of last season. Javonte apparently looks like he's going to play and be a full go week 1. He's always been a committee back, though, in college and the NFL. Does that mean that we could potentially be starting Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine in fantasy? Neither of them, both of them, just one of them. I think there's a lot of wiggle room there for an offense that looks like it's going to be run heavy and funnel a lot of just the general offense through the running backs in the pass game. The wide receiver 2 role, is it going to be Courtland Sutton? Will Marvin Mims overtake him at some point? That's very important for fantasy. It looks like Jerry Jeudy's probably missing week 1, but I still don't think that's an absolute certainty. And I think he's pretty much locked in as the top pass game option, a borderline fantasy wide receiver 1 anytime he takes the field. The last question I have that I want to start to answer is tight end Greg Dulcich. He had a 17% target share last year, which was the 3rd best by a rookie tight end over the past decade. Only Kyle Pitts and Evan Engram had better rookie seasons than Greg Dulcich. But again, it's a new head coach. Sean Payton brought in one of his guys, blocking tight end Adam Troutman. There is potential that Adam Troutman keeps Greg Dulcich off the field more than we'd like for fantasy. Not that Troutman's going to out-target him, but more so that if Troutman's on the field, it makes it less likely that Dulcich will be on the field. What else do you want to add to this Broncos team? And what is the I guess fans want to know what the ceiling is for this team now that we saw clearly the floor last year. Can this team make the playoffs? Are they going to make a run at the division? How do you see it breaking down?
If the Chiefs miss Kelce and Jones long term, sure, I think they could make a run to the division. I think they could be a playoff team, but again, the AFC just has so many quality teams. And I think Sean Payton made a mistake with talking about Nathaniel Hackett. I think the Jets were in a spot where they were playing the Chiefs in week 4, classic letdown spot going to Denver. That's a different environment now. I think that's going to end up costing Denver a game. That's actually why I have them under 500.
We have the Las Vegas Raiders finishing 4-13. We've already bet against them multiple ways. We've had articles on the site all offseason about how we're betting against them. I want to see if Jimmy Garoppolo can look at least semi-competent now that he's outside the little cocoon of the Kyle Shanahan offense. And I think that ultimately just trickles down to Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, and Jacoby Myers. It's pretty simple. Give us a little more bad news about why you have this team at 4-13.
Yeah, I mean, this team reminds me of the David Gettleman era Giants, where it's like they think that they're competitive when they should probably be rebuilding. It's like they don't really know who they are currently. And my concern here is this: if Brock Purdy's a limited quarterback, and he was the last pick in the last round last year, probably is, him outperforming Jimmy Garoppolo, the offense getting better under Purdy's has to make you question what Jimmy Garoppolo is capable of. So I think the Raiders start the season with a brutal schedule. I think they're gonna have a tough time digging themselves out of that hole.
On a more positive note, we have a free Discord.
Yeah.
Start sits, trade advice, player prop bets, DFS advice. That free Discord's linked in my Twitter at JLarkyTweets. Just go there, click the link, join the Discord. Like I said, it's free. There's a wealth of information in there. Ryan will be in there. I'll be in there. Our head of DFS, Jordan Vanek, will be in there. And one last thing before we switch to the NFC, it is actually Ryan Reynolds' birthday today. I'm not making this up. It's a true fact. I talked to some sports books. I posted a line. I set the line at 21 and a half years of age. There's been heavy early action flooding to the over. Ryan, what do you have to say about this?
I mean, if I was in charge of that sports book and you set the line at 21 and a half, I'd fire you. But, thanks for the shout out, pal.
Let's turn to the NFC West. You have the Niners atop the division at 12-5. The fantasy question to me is, what do the target shares look like? We've got Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. That is a lot of mouths to feed, as some will say. And I think that actually applies here, where we have a limited distributor in Brock Purdy at quarterback and 4 guys that you could theoretically see as like the focal point of many NFL teams' offenses. What else should we look at here and on defense?
I mean, the 49ers are an excellent defense. Obviously, the Nick Bosa contract situation was not resolved before we went on the air, at least. That's, puts a little bit of uncertainty in the mix. But, they brought in Hargrave from Philadelphia. I think they have the best front 4 in the league, probably the best defense in the league. And the truth is, Kyle Shanahan can win with any quarterback. We've seen that. It doesn't really matter who it is, if it's Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy. They're still going to be a very good team, very tough out. And like you've said a few times over the offseason, the 49ers, this is like their last year where they can keep the band together, so to speak. They're going to start losing people to salary cap constraints and stuff. So I think they'll be at least towards the top of the NFC, if not the outright number 1 seed.
The Cinderella story of this offseason has been our love affair with the Seattle Seahawks. They did not take a quarterback in the draft. They extended Geno Smith. It looks like they're going to build on their surprising playoff performance. 11-6 for this year is the prediction. I'm very excited. You're excited. On offense, will they start to run more 3 receiver sets now that they have round 1 rookie Jackson Smith and Jigba in at receiver? DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, JSN, potentially the best trio in the NFL. We'll kind of know how that's shaping up early in the season. And then at running back, what does the Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet split look like? They took back-to-back round 2 running backs in the NFL draft last year and this year. Kenneth Walker's range of outcomes is pretty wide. It could be anywhere from a between the 20s grinder to a borderline full-on like Nick Chubb level bell cow. And then Zach Charbonnet's range of outcomes is pretty big too. Is he simply the breather back for Kenneth Walker who gets a couple targets a game? Or is he the guy that comes in at the goal line where Kenneth Walker's been a little inconsistent sometimes in short yardage situations? Does Zach Charbonnet just spell him completely anytime a 3rd down shows up, a 2nd and long shows up? I think that's a good one for us to monitor early on in the season. And Kenneth Walker, you should start him in fantasy this week. And Zach Charbonnet is the perfect bench stash early on this year. What else should we look at with Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about Seattle is they can beat in so many different ways, and that's usually a hallmark of a lot of the best teams in the league. They can beat you on the ground, they can beat you in the air. They have a pretty good defense. I have 2 concerns. Their pass rush is a mediocre pass rush still. And, there is the chance that Geno Smith turns back into a pumpkin to a degree. Maybe it's not a complete pumpkin. Maybe it's just not quite what we saw last year. But otherwise, if Geno Smith repeats what he did last year, Seahawks can come out of the NFC.
You have the Los Angeles Rams at 4-13. Cooper Kupp is on the mend now with the hamstring injury. I'm looking at what Cam Akers' usage will be. He was pretty much a bell cow down the stretch last year when Baker Mayfield came in at quarterback for the final month and a half. I think Tyler Higbee in Cooper Kupp's absence will be a target monster. I think even whenever Cooper Kupp returns, he could be, the tight end 4, the tight end 5 in targets per game. I think it's very realistic given how weak everyone after Cooper Kupp is in this pass game. And I think while Cooper Kupp is out, is any receiver going to be fantasy relevant consistently? My money is on no. But if you're more optimistic than me, I don't think it's the worst idea to throw a Van Jefferson, a Tutu Atwell, or the rookie Puka Nacua on the back end of your fantasy bench. You seem concerned. Why do you have them at 4-13? I thought they were going to come out of last year and take a step forward this year. You clearly are saying no here.
I feel bad about this. But of all, I'm pretty insensitive to this stuff. I just try to be objective, but I feel bad about having the Rams at 4-13. But the truth of the matter is this: 2 games against the 49ers, 2 games against the Seahawks, the AFC North, the NFC East. That's at least 9 games where they're playing at a significant talent deficit because, Stafford, McVay, Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp when he's back is a really good core. But after that, I think it was Hilo said, something like 71% of their defensive starters are undrafted free agents. It's not a good situation on defense. It's not a good situation.
Yeah, that might have been one of the lines of the offseason is when Hilo and Jordan Vanek on their Cover 5 DFS podcast this offseason were breaking down secondaries they want to target for DFS and just for fantasy football. And they went, wow, The Rams are the one you want to target, and it's not even close when you look at the personnel they'll be rolling out. It's Aaron Donald and a bunch of bones right now on this defense. The Arizona Cardinals. Oh, yeah.
No, I was going to say, when you have 5 starters on defense where I don't know who they are, that's very, very rare. Very rare.
Yeah. The Arizona Cardinals, you have them 2-15. That is the worst record you've predicted. I don't think that should surprise anyone. For fantasy, I just want to know if I can start the probable, at least early season, bell cow and James Conner in fantasy. And if I'm able to start Marquise Brown in fantasy. Right now, I actually think former NASA astronaut or technician, I don't even know what his job was, but Josh Dobbs looks like he's going to be their week 1 starter. I know he was at NASA and then he left his NASA job to fill in for a Titans game last year. I truly don't know what's going on, but that shows you the state of this quarterback room. If that is their week 1 starter and just the state of this team in general, you think they get the number 1 pick?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on when Kyler Murray returns, and then the thing is, if he returns, which is why I have him at 2-15, because if he doesn't, 0-17 is very much on the table. We'll talk about this on Thursday. I think they can make week 1 against Washington interesting, but Josh Dobbs, Clayton Tune behind a bad offensive line against a pretty tough schedule, like we just mentioned, that's not good.
Turn to the NFC South. The New Orleans Saints have the easiest schedule in the NFL. You and I were on this many, many, many months ago when we put out our strength of schedule metrics and early win-loss predictions in May. You have them at 11-6. For fantasy, is Jamal Williams a bell cow while Alvin Kamara is out? And then when Alvin Kamara returns after his 3-game suspension, is he the Alvin Kamara of old? I think he's probably back. Last year was a little bit of a down year, but he's still 15 carries a game, 4 receptions a game. That's truly elite usage for fantasy football. He only scored 4 touchdowns on nearly 300 total touches. I think the touchdowns spike with this easy schedule. I think Kamara is once again relevant. And then what's going on with Michael Thomas? I've told everyone start him week 1 against the Titans. There's no Alvin Kamara. Titans do not have a very good pass defense. Where does it go from there? And how do we see Chris Olave and Michael Thomas and just this whole pass game when it's a cake schedule? Derek Carr is a good distributor, but again, this is a Michael Thomas that's played 10 games over the past 3 seasons. What else do you want to add about the New Orleans Saints luck boxing their way into a schedule that I believe you and I would both agree is significantly easier than what the Eagles even had last year?
Yeah, it's the easiest schedule I can remember in recent years, at least. And, I think the Saints are an average, solid team, like an 8-9 win team that I think they're going to get to 10-11 wins because of the schedule. And Daniel Raz recently wrote up divisions and win totals a week ago or so, where he brought up an interesting point. One thing New Orleans has going against them is they're getting older. They're an old team. They're not ascending in a lot of position groups. So I think there's some chance the bottom falls out, but in general, they're in a good position to have a better record than their actual talent level is.
You have the Atlanta Falcons at 9-8. If there was ever a team that I just wanted to airdrop a competent quarterback into, I think it would be this one. We've had so many talks about, imagine Lamar Jackson on the Falcons. Why didn't the Falcons make a run at Trey Lance? Just put Ryan Tannehill on the Falcons and see what happens. Ultimately, a lot of this team lives and dies with Desmond Ridder, their 3rd-round pick last year, and if he takes a step forward in year 2, he did not score a touchdown in 3 of his 4 starts last year, as in no passing and no rushing touchdowns. I hope that improves. It's got to improve in some way, but I think that shows that the floor of this offense is still pretty low considering who's the under center at times. And then with Bijan Robinson, is he a bell cow? I don't think he is, but I don't think he needs to be for fantasy. I think this team's going to be so run heavy that it hurts Drake London. It hurts Kyle Pitts. And ultimately, it helps Bijan Robinson and at times Tyler Algier. You'll see that I don't have Bijan Robinson as a top 3 fantasy back for week 1. I just kind of want to wait and see. I do have him as a fantasy RB1, but I think we need to see if he's getting 15 touches, 20 touches, 25 touches a game. None of those outcomes would really surprise me at this point. What else do you have to add about the Falcons?
We talked about this last week. If the Rams decided to trade Matthew Stafford to the Falcons right now, like this week, I'd literally have them at 13-4. They have the second easiest schedule in the league. Their defense got better. top 10 offensive line, 3 blue skip skill position players that are still on their rookie deals. They have a lot of talent, but like, who is Desmond Ridder? To me, if you can get mediocre quarterback play out of them, they can win 8 or 9 games. If you can get like a Taylor Heineke type season out of this guy, 9 or 8 wins. But, you know, I wish this team had a quarterback, Josh. I really do.
Guys, you can follow Ryan at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. And reminder that it's his birthday. So if you hate him, you don't want to follow him, and you hate listening to this podcast, you might as well drop him the charity follow as a free birthday gift. You have the Carolina Panthers at 6-11. I did a study this offseason, the past 15 years, in games started by rookie quarterbacks. They actually pace to a 6-11 season over 17 games. Looks like you just carbon copied that research. You're welcome. For fantasy, I want to see what the running back room looks like. There's this phantom talk about, the Miles Sanders with Deuce Staley reuniting with his running backs coach from when he was a rookie with the Eagles, and now he's going to catch all these passes. He's a bad pass blocker. Bryce Young's under 200 pounds. I think Miles Sanders is probably relegated to 15 early down carries. But for fantasy, the upside is immense if for some reason they gift wrap him that role, or if he's just been working on his pass blocking this offseason. For fantasy, can Bryce Young elevate anyone in this receiver room? I'm inclined to think not this year. But I think, again, could the veteran Adam Thielen be consistent enough to be a flex play in PPR leagues? Could the second round rookie Jonathan Mingo emerge as an alpha receiver in the NFL? I lean towards no, but I'm open to it given the prospect profile of Bryce Young and how this looks like a decent offensive line on paper. What else should we add here about the Panthers?
Their first 6 games are their toughest schedule stretch of the year, so I think they're going to struggle early and get better late. Where I could see entering next offseason, we're talking about Bryce Young's in the driver's seat to take this division over in the short term, at least. But like you said, they don't have a great supporting cast on offense. The offensive line's solid, but it's not something that blows me away really. And not right now, Brian Burns is apparently like holding in or not showing up to practice and such. So if their best defensive player is not going to play early in the year too, I mean, there's not a whole lot to like entering this season right now.
Not a whole lot to like either about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You have them 3-14. That is the second worst record that you've projected this year, ahead of only the lowly Arizona Cardinals. For fantasy, which version of Baker Mayfield do we get? Do we get the guy that set at the time the rookie passing touchdowns record in less than a full rookie season when he looked like the next big thing in the NFL? Or do we get the Baker Mayfield that tossed 20 picks and was run out of the Cleveland Browns organization? I'm not trying to start Baker Mayfield in fantasy. I'm trying to start Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. That's why I want to know what kind of Baker we get. There's also been the recent rumors that Mike Evans does not talk to the team, that he wants out. I think we'd both agree the New York Giants, the Detroit Lions would be very tasty landing spots for real football and for fantasy. And then Rachaad White, is he a bell cow? He had a disappointing rookie season. He is a big, fast running back with pretty elite receiving production in college. So the pieces are there for a true difference-making fantasy season. But I think a lot of that's going to rest on how Baker Mayfield runs his offense and just if Rachaad White's prospect profile or his disappointing year one is more indicative of who he is as a player. What else do you want to add about this 3-win Buccaneers roster?
I mean, one of my concerns here is Ryan Jensen's no longer playing center for the Buccaneers. So he was one of the stability pieces they had where they were, middle of the pack offensive line there. Now I think they're a bad one. Tristan Wirfs is awesome, but he's moving from right tackle to left tackle. Everyone else is kind of a question mark. So Baker Mayfield replacing Tom Brady, which is one of the biggest drop-offs in leadership, success, you name it. And that's not even really a shot at Baker Mayfield. Tom Brady is the most successful quarterback in the history of the league. It's just, I think the defense is good, but I don't think it's good enough to overcome everything that they're losing. And I just don't see a lot of success coming this year in Tampa.
Before we move to the NFC North, we actually have projections on the site for week 1 from our own resident data scientist, Ben Wolby. Make sure to check that out. That'll be up on the site later today. So if you want to be able to see projections, understand how our team behind the scenes is viewing these teams for their median outcomes, these players for their median outcomes, you definitely need to check that out. You have the Detroit Lions atop the NFC North. I think this is their year. Finally, The rebuild is complete. They look like the best team in this division. For fantasy, it looks, at least early, if not the whole season, the offense just funnels through Amon-Ra St. Brown and then the two running backs in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I currently have both Gibbs and Montgomery as top 20 running backs for week 1 for fantasy. I had them as top 20 running backs during the offseason for fantasy drafts. I'm very high on this run game behind this incredible offensive line. Jameson Williams is suspended the first 6 weeks of the season. I don't even know if that matters, though, for the rest of this year, given that apparently he's struggling with immaturity. He's dropping passes. We could have a weird three-headed monster of Amon-Ra and the two running backs for fantasy behind this great offensive line. And it could look like an offense we might not have ever seen before. What else do you want to add here to this Lions team?
Yeah, not a great start to his career for Jameson Williams. We'll see what happens later in the year. Premium offensive line, well coached. Like you said, I think the offense runs through the running backs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jared Goff's a solid quarterback, not a great quarterback, but I think he's better than a lot of people have given him credit for in general. I mean, he played in a Super Bowl with the Rams. The Lions are a successful team. Not many quarterbacks do that. Defense should be better. I think 10-7, 11-6 is the most likely outcome here, barring injuries, which when you're predicting records, you can't really get too involved in that.
You have the Vikings at 8-9. They were 13-4 last year. You have regression hitting them like a freight train, as I think we should. I believe if they, what were they, 11-0 last year in one-score games. That usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
For fantasy, I want to see if Alexander Mattison gets the Dalvin Cook role. I think the second-year speedster Ty Chandler takes on more work as the season goes on. I know you and I are both intrigued by their signing of former Dolphins running back Myles Gaskin, who's undersized, but he has a nice all-purpose skill set. So I think there's a wide range of what can happen in that backfield. And then if I'm going to put on my football guy hat for a second, it looks like a team that's going to run a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field, maybe even 21 personnel with 2 running backs on the field. And you might be like, Josh, tell me more. Well, they brought back fullback CJ Ham. And then their tight end 2, Josh Oliver, is one of the 2 or 3 best blocking tight ends in the NFL. So I think what that could mean for fantasy is actually very good, where if you're only having 2 receivers on the field at one time, obviously Justin Jefferson's great, but that would be huge for Jordan Addison, not having to worry about having a 3rd receiver on the field with him. And then for TJ Hawkinson at tight end, that's obviously great if there's not a 3rd receiver competing for targets with him whenever he's on the field. And that if Oliver's in there blocking, Hawkinson can be in there receiving. What else are you looking for with this Vikings team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the offense is going to be good. I could see them scoring fewer touchdowns and settling for more field goals. I think that's one of the paths to regression here. The other thing is this: if Brian Flores turns the Vikings into like the 24th best defense, I mean, he should be given a Nobel Prize for that kind of achievement. That in itself is a big ask with this group. So I think they're going to be dangerous, and they're going to be right around 500.
You also have the Bears right around 500. You have the Chicago Bears 8-9, the same as the Vikings. Clearly, you have the whole roster taking a step forward. It's much improved this year. For me, for fantasy, I want to know if Justin Fields takes a step forward as a passer. And assuming that he takes some kind of leap forward, what does that mean for his legs for fantasy? I wouldn't say I'm down on Justin Fields in fantasy, but I've been a little less excited than some people because I don't think you can keep the 1,000+ rushing yards with that passing ceiling that some are projecting. I think kind of one has to go, and there's give and take there. And I think also DJ Moore, how does that affect him? Because if Justin Fields looks like he did last year, Darnell Mooney had a 25% target share and you couldn't start him. I think DJ Moore gets a 25% target share this year. So then his fantasy value rests entirely in Justin Fields. And if this team's able to drop back and pass more than like 20 times per game, when league average is closer to 33, 34 times per game, what else should we be looking at? And run through a couple more roster improvements from this Bears team.
Yeah, Chicago, I mean, they have a lot of margin for error because they were the worst team in the league, or margin for improvement because they were the worst team in the league last year. So, a 4 or 5 game jump still only gets them to 8 wins. Now, to that end, I think I'm the most ambitious on the Jets and the Bears. Like if someone was going to yell at me about, you have these guys too high, those are the two teams I'd be most willing to accept an argument for, because maybe I do have them a little high, but I do think Fields is going to improve as a passer. DJ Moore changes their offense entirely, because not only does he give them a real number one option, he puts Claypool and Mooney in role players positions, which is better for everyone. The offensive line's better. The defense is significantly better. Last year, their defense was an absolute disaster after they traded Roquan Smith. They have a few good pieces in the secondary, at least one professional pass rusher now in Ngakoue, and they have a very good linebacker duo. So I'm not thinking the Bears are going to be a great defense, but I think their defense will be better than the Vikings, and that they're sneakily similar teams, the Vikings and Bears, in terms of capability.
Is that a hot take? We'll find out during this season. I'm inclined to think that Ryan knows what he's talking about, given his track record and given the research he does. You have the Green Bay Packers finishing last in the division at 7-10. For fantasy, it's simple. What do we get out of Jordan Love? There's a lot of wish casting with what he could be. There's also a lot of general pessimism. It's probably going to fall somewhere in the middle, as it usually does. And then for fantasy, I'll just say, everyone, you should stash Jayden Reed if you're in a deep fantasy league, especially PPR. Think of their round 2 receiver selection as Deontay Johnson light. It's a guy that earned targets at a decent rate in college. Special teams monster, dangerous after the catch. And I'm just not convinced that Romeo Doubs is some insurmountable obstacle. And I'm also not convinced that Christian Watson is obviously the clear-cut alpha target earner in this offense. So he's a good stash for these deep leagues, where if Jordan Love hits, we could see a pretty big boost to obviously Christian Watson, but then Jayden Reed as well. What else are you looking for this new look Packers team?
This was when I did record predictions by division earlier in August. The Packers, I gave the biggest jump. I had them at 5-12. I got them to 7-10, primarily because I think the defense really can be a top 5 unit in a best case scenario. I think that's on the table. And then if the offense is even average, they can steal a few games in a very manageable schedule. But the truth is, Minnesota, the Bears, and the Packers are all kind of volatile teams, where I could see this, I could see this finishing out behind Detroit in any fashion for the most part.
Guys, reminder that Ryan's betting previews for every single game will be up on the site later today through Thursday. There's no other place to look. If you want to understand, some people out there, you might be like, well, you lost me at the word betting preview. Even if you're in a state that you can't bet in, or you simply don't want to bet, this is real football talk from Ryan. It is not just, here's the bets to place for this game. It's the matchups. It's really looking at the offensive and defensive lines. It's looking at the quarterback against the secondary. What Ryan's doing is basically helping you if you were to watch that game, or if you were to bet on that game or have fantasy players in that game, what should you be looking for? What's the paths for each team in that game to succeed and to fail? We made it. Let's do the final division, and then we will do a quick preview for the Thursday Night Football Lions-Chiefs game. The NFC East, you have the Cowboys winning. I know it's a surprise. You might be the only major media outlet with the Cowboys atop this division that resides outside of Dallas. You have them 12-5 for fantasy. Does Tony Pollard's role expand? His role was great for fantasy last year, but he was reliant on touchdowns. You might be like, well, Tony Pollard's explosive. Of course he is. His actual usage was a lot worse than people think. He flirted with 200 carries last year. He didn't get there. His target share was 19th best at the running back position, and he still was a fantasy RB1. Obviously, that means the ceiling is immense, but I think the floor is that he doesn't take that much of a step forward, and they like him in that type of role, and the touchdowns come down. I'm curious how Brandon Cooks integrates into this offense. Will that take away from CeeDee Lamb? Can Brandon Cooks rebound? I think Brandon Cooks could be anywhere from the player he was 2 years ago to the next Allen Robinson, where we see a declining season. He's approaching 30, and then next thing you know, the cliff falls out. I think Brandon Cooks is fine, but it's something to look at. And then the last thing for deep fantasy leagues, probably you want to stash tight end Jake Ferguson. Dalton Schultz is not a world beater, and he was consistently fantasy relevant in this offense. Jake Ferguson looks like he has a stranglehold on that starting tight end job. What else should we be looking at on a team that you are very, very bullish on in the Dallas Cowboys?
I mean, there's 3 stable teams in the NFC, the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Cowboys. The Cowboys have been 12-5 in each of the last 2 years. Top 5 offensive line, potentially top 5 defense. They got better on both sides of the ball. You mentioned Cooks. They brought in Stephon Gilmore to play cornerback aside from Diggs. that gives them the best cornerback duo, or at least to frame this, when Andy Benoit did his top 9 cornerbacks, they're the only team with 2 top 9 quarterbacks. So Dallas is a good team that got better. And one of the things with Dak Prescott is I always think he's been misvalued every single year. Either people have been way too high on him, and now I think they're way too low on him because he had a bad year from an interceptions perspective. And, we had Mike Martz look into that. We had our Ben Wolby look into that. They both, and when I'm paraphrasing here for both of those gentlemen, they view Dak as a positive regression candidate on the interceptions front. So I think he's going to have a better year this year. I think Dallas is already a tough out, and they're, 12-13 win team.
You have the Eagles finishing second at 11-6. The fantasy question for me is quick and dirty. What does the running back room look like? It's going to be some combination of DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, Kenneth Gainwell. I think in that order is how we'd rank them in fantasy early on. Week 1 will tell us a lot about that split, when that's really the one part of this offense in major flux. Before kicking it to you, if someone out there, I keep hearing people going like, "Oh, like what's the upside? It's a committee." The Eagles actually had 33% more rushing touchdowns than any other NFL team last year. They were top 3 in rushing yards. The upside is immense. For anyone wondering, we saw Miles Sanders in a limited role where he never caught passes, still being a consistent fantasy RB2. So I'm not giving up on DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny, and I think Kenny Gainwell sneaky. What are you looking for from this Eagles team that lost its offensive and defensive coordinator this offseason?
Yeah, those are 2 big losses, especially on offense. Last year, I was a big-time Eagles bull. I bet on it. I bet on their win total as soon as it came out. I talked about them being the best roster in the league all year. This year, I think a lot of that's at least still close to being true, but the schedule is harder, and they're going to be reliant on a lot of more young talent. Now, Howie Roseman's very good at what he does, so a lot of the young talent like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis are premium prospects. But, there's a few holes that weren't there last year, so I still have them as around an 11-12 win team. I leaned a little bit towards the under in that. I have them at 11-6. Still think they're going to be a factor all year.
You have Big Blue, the New York Giants, at 8-9. You are a Giants fan. So Giants fans out there, if Ryan's not extremely bullish on them, there's maybe some cause for concern for regression from what they did last year when they snuck into the playoffs. For me, for fantasy, can Darren Waller stay healthy? Whenever he's healthy, he's an elite fantasy tight end. And also, whenever he's healthy, I assume the pass game will open up a little bit more. What we saw from Daniel Jones last year, his first season under former Bills coach Brian Daboll, is that this was a conservative offense. They knew what they were working with. There was no receiver core. Daniel Jones, his passes traveled the fewest amount of yards downfield out of all qualified passers. And I think that opens up more, but how much? He's not going to be last again in the NFL, but is he going to be 26th? Or could he be 16th? I think where that falls is major for Darren Waller. And then if we're able to start some of those auxiliary receivers on occasion. What else do you want to add here to the New York Giants?
Yeah, the people in my personal life are not very happy with my 8-9 record prediction, but it actually means I lean slightly towards the over on the Giants. And here's the thing. I think the Giants are going to be better this year, especially on offense, but their first half schedule is just absolutely brutal. So 8-9, 9-8 in the playoff mix. I think Daniel Jones takes a step forward. If Darren Waller stays healthy all year, I think that's a big positive for everyone involved. I think the Giants are better. They're very well coached, very stable, but still only a wild card team at best.
Last in the division is the Washington Commanders, 6-11. Sam Howell's now their quarterback. He was taken round 5 last year. You and I do not think Sam Howell's very good. A lot of people are very certain this is their quarterback of the future, the starter all season. I think I'd put it at least at 50-50 that we see a Jacoby Brissett spot start, if not more. I'm curious what Eric Bieniemy's play calling is going to look like. He was the longtime Chiefs offensive coordinator. People wondered why he didn't get a head coaching job, and I think it makes sense. Andy Reid was definitely pulling a lot of the strings there on that team. What does Eric Bieniemy's offense look like with the Commanders? And the reason I say that is, will he be pass heavy like Andy Reid, which then obviously benefits Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin? Or will a lot of their run heavy ways from last season continue, where rookie Brian Robinson averaged over 17 carries a game last year? I think Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson have a wide range of how that split can shake out. And with Terry McLaurin still not practicing due to turf toe, can Jahan Dotson play well enough early on and cement himself with Sam Howell that he is kind of keeping up to pace with McLaurin, or maybe surpassing him at times in targets, where I don't believe we're going to be able to start both those guys consistently in fantasy, given it's Sam Howell. So I really am hoping that one of them sort of says to the other, hey, this is my pass game. I'm the guy that's going to be getting 25% of the targets. And hopefully that happens for fantasy football. What else should we be looking at here? And talk to us about this very talented defense.
The best thing that could happen to the Washington Commanders this year is if they're the worst team in the league, because they have a phenomenal front four. They have a very good skill group. Their offensive line's getting better. Their secondary's getting better. You add Caleb Williams to this deal, the Commanders could run the NFC for the next decade. So that's how I see this. Even if Sam Howell plays well, what does that mean? Like, are they going to be a 10-11 win team in the next 5 years? That seems outrageously ambitious to me. That's maybe even beyond the best case scenario. So for the sake of, the starved Commanders fans out there, I hope they underwhelm so you can get a rock solid, phenomenal quarterback this offseason.
I'd agree there, guys. That's at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Let's quickly chat about this Thursday night game. It's a game of interest because we have the Chiefs, the best offense in the NFL last year, and the Lions, who were the 5th best offense in the NFL last year. This game got as high as 55 total points for the over-under. I saw that at one point last night. It's already down to 53.5 and continuing to drop because Travis Kelce hyperextended his knee. The implied team totals, when you break down the spread of Chiefs favored by 6 points, would be Detroit somewhere around 23, 24 points. Kansas City Chiefs somewhere around 29, 30 total points. So we're looking at about 3 touchdowns for the Lions, closer to 4 for the Chiefs. We will have a DFS showdown article on the site soon from our head of DFS, Jordan Vanek, breaking down what should be a very exciting matchup. What do you want to discuss from this game that you're willing to reveal? Because we all know that your betting preview, your matchups preview for this game will be on the site, the33rdteam.com, free to read later this afternoon.
Yeah, I leaned into some showdown stuff for this game because it's opening night and it's a big high interest matchup, like you said. But Chris Jones likely missing this contest means that the Lions have a premier offensive line. I think this game mimics the game they had against Buffalo on Thanksgiving last year, where they're going to run the absolute hell out of the ball against the Chiefs, to great success on that front. Something in the vein of 30-24, 28-24, closer game, where maybe the Lions even have the lead for some of it. I think, Jordan Vanek sees this way too. In a showdown lineup, I'm comfortable playing Gibbs and Montgomery in the same lineup. I actually really like the showdown lineup because I have more of a narrow player pool than I think most people would. But I think the Chiefs ultimately win. But I think the Lions are going to give them everything they can handle, just like they gave the Bills last year.
Guys, we were all over the Jahmyr Gibbs receiving yards over. We were all over Noah Gray's over. Even independent of anything happening with Kelce, we liked his over. Obviously, it looks even better now.
Yeah.
And you can be first to get these player props. Just hop into the 33rd Team Discord. Just follow me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets, or don't follow me if you hate me, but you can still see the link there. Click that link to join our free Discord. Start, sit advice, trade advice. You can chat with myself. You can chat with Ryan Reynolds. You can chat with Jordan Vanek. You can chat with the rest of the team. That is going to be the best place to interact with all of us throughout this entire football season. That is our 2023 quick rapid fire preview. We did it in 65 minutes. We will both be back on Thursday to break down the week 1 matchups for fantasy and for betting and for real football. And starting next week, we'll be back to our normal cadence where Mondays and Thursdays we podcast. We both did not podcast for Labor Day yesterday. I hope you can forgive us. So make sure to tune in on Thursday from myself, from Ryan Reynolds, from the 33rd Team. Thank you, everyone.